Greetings everyone and welcome in today's webinar. Today we will be discussing a very interesting topic from Risk and Management Portfolio, topic regarding the aligning COBIT 5 and ISO 38500 for effective IT governance. My name is Olumide, the PECB organizer of this webinar, and the guest for today is Mr. Olumide, the Chief Trainer for Training Heights Limited. Please write your questions and comments in the question box in the right-hand control panel, and Mr. Orlando will answer to them accordingly in the end of the presentation. Please, Mr. Orlando, you may start the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, so good, it's afternoon where I am. So good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody can hear me clearly. All right, my name is Orlando once again, and it's my pleasure to be here, and I will be driving this webinar today, aligning COBIT 5 and ISO 38500. That's a mistake, actually. It's meant to be ISO 38500, not 385,000. However, so please, we'll change that before we put it up finally. It's meant to be ISO 38500 for effective IT governance. Okay? So I've been doing IT for definitely more than a decade, possibly a decade and a half, that I've been doing IT, and especially around IT management and governance. All right, so I've been exposed to the methodology called COBIT from the organization called ISACA, ISACA. They're also the owners of qualifications like CISA and CISM. I've been exposed to the methodology from version 3. I think now it had to be around 2003, thereabouts, to version 3 of COBIT. And I've been familiar with version 3, version 4, version 4.1, and the latest of them now, which is called COBIT 5. It's the 5th version of COBIT, and I've been familiar with them. And I know what it is in terms of using it for IT governance. But about a couple of years ago, I also came in contact with ISO 38500, which is corporate governance corporate governance for the management of IT as a standard. So when you look at that new document, you see that very much they referred a lot to COBIT 5 inside of the document in itself. Okay, the actual name for it is Corporate Governance of IT, ISO 38500. So they referred a lot to COBIT 5 inside of it. So by doing work for various clients, I noticed that if I'm going to be able to do this effectively, if I'm going to be able to deliver ISO 38500 effectively to a client or for a client, I have to literally be an expert at using COBIT 5, because COBIT 5 is the extended document that provides the guidelines and a lot of guidance for how to actually get an organization certified on ISO 38500. So that's why we came up with this topic, and it's my pleasure to be here. Okay, I'll quickly move on. So I've said in here, let me just do this. Okay. So I said, what does COBIT have to offer, and what is contained in the extensive body of knowledge called COBIT 5? As far as version 4, COBIT 5 used to be a 400 plus page document. But when they came up with COBIT 5 almost 2 years ago, they completely blew it open, and it's become a much more broader and a bigger document than what it used to be. Okay, so now COBIT is probably like almost 700 pages of work that is even being improved, and added more documents are added onto it on a daily basis. So we're going to look at what it's got to offer, and we're going to look at what is the complementary value that ISO 38500 brings to an organization. So that's going to be the key point that we're going to be looking at today. Okay? So COBIT used to be one document, as I said. It used to be a 400 plus page document. But now COBIT is a family of documents. There is the 94, 95 page document, which is the framework, which is like the baseline document that provides guidance to the other parts. Then there are the other documents that we call the enabling process and the enabling information. And we also now have the professional guides. And as of today, you've got implementation, information security, assurance, risk. So if you just what I have on the board on this slide, says that there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 documents as of today, and none of those documents, all of them go about 100-page plus. Some of them go as much as 200 pages. So you're right to say that as of today, COBIT is 1,000 pages worth of guidance for an organization that is looking to do IT governance. Okay, and it's still relatively brand new. Very few organizations are the ones that have come up with it, or sorry, that have adopted it as of today. So it's still very much brand new, and it is the document when it comes to IT governance. It is the guidance for the entire world when it comes to IT governance. And as I go through this slide, you'll see why it is extremely important and why people who do IT governance need to have a huge level of expertise using COBIT, and why anybody who is looking to do ISO 38500 also needs to be able to know COBIT adequately. Otherwise, they will not be able to effectively deliver ISO 38500, because the document in itself does refer to COBIT a lot. Okay? All right, so once again, you've got this diagram that shows a lot of the documents. So as I said, about at least 7 documents as of today, which will amount to about 1,000 pages worth of guidance for IT governance. Okay, good. So one of the things that COBIT talks about, and anybody who's been doing COBIT for a while will remember that in version 4, it had something, they called it the characteristics of information, where it talks about efficiency, accuracy, effectiveness, and it came up with 7 different characteristics of information. They're still very much relevant. So COBIT uses the concept of information. It doesn't, so a lot of people think that it's about the technology. No, it is about information. So when you say information technology, primary is information, technology is secondary. So COBIT really does look at information and says information is a key resource for the enterprise, and an organization needs to be able to manage their information adequately from when it is created to when it is destroyed, right? Just to say that, you know, increasingly information is the lifeline or the blood of the organization. So it's very important that any organization clearly understands the value of information. When you want to do IT governance, you don't start from technology. This is how COBIT is different from ITIL. This is how COBIT is different from TOGAF or any of those other methodologies. It is complementary, and it relies on a lot of those other methodologies. But most importantly, is the fact that the information in itself is what it is that drives the organization. Okay, information is the blood, is the lifeline of the organization, and it has to be adequately and appropriately managed. Okay, so this is very important. In fact, in the COBIT document, you have loads and loads of pages that talks about information and describes information, the information lifecycle, how it's created, how it should be managed, who needs to work with it. You know, it's extensive when it comes to its description of information. Okay, I'll go on quickly. So, what are the business concerns that have made us develop the COBIT guide or the COBIT document in itself? First and foremost, obviously, as I said, is to ensure that the quality of information that is used within the business can be reliable, because business decisions are made based on information. So it's important that the business is guaranteed that the information that they have is clear and is useful. Then we say, well, generate business value from IT-enabled investment. So the businesses are not just interested in IT, they're interested in ensuring that IT delivers value to them. So it's very important, and it is critical that every business where information and how technology is also one of the things that drives why you need COBIT. You cannot manage information appropriately or manage technology adequately except you use also that is information related and the rest that is technology related. Also, technology, and finally ensuring that that you stay in line with the regulators, that you stay in line with everything that's statutory with regards to the organization. So these are real business concerns that have driven why COBIT has been created and developed for the use of the enterprise. Okay. So apart from the concerns, what is driving this? Right? What's driving this? And COBIT has, in fact, in this slide, I only put about 5 of them. COBIT talks about 11 things that are driving the development of COBIT, right? One of them obviously is saying that, to provide stakeholders with a lot of comfort, right? If you look at the first point, it says determining what they expect from information and related technology, benefits, acceptable level of risk, at what cost. So this is very important. These are the things that are driving the use and the development of COBIT. Addressing the dependency of enterprise success on external business and IT, but such as cloud providers and service providers. So this conversation rings true. Remember in ITIL speaks about having your 3 types of service providers and your 4 types of suppliers. It says you should look at the categorization of your suppliers. Because every IT department has a set of service providers and a set of suppliers. So it's important that that is managed, dealing with the amount of information that the enterprise has got to deal with. So if you look at big data and all the conversation around big data, all the conversation around the cloud usage and storage, it's all dealing with information and ensuring that the business has adequate information when they need them. Yesterday night, I was still reading an article that was focused on how Hadoop has metamorphosized into Spark and how Spark has metamorphosized into a new one. And everybody's talking about how these huge database systems are helping organizations with regards to storage and how information is being provided. So that's important. Also, the technology changes every morning. Every day there's a new invention from a technology provider, whether it's Microsoft or Cisco or it's Oracle or Citrix or VMware. There's a new conversation on a daily basis with regards to IT. So IT needs to be managed adequately because also the investment in IT has become very much material. Right? Further to that, innovation. So I work with organizations in trying to help them develop their innovation capabilities. Now, one consistent conversation that keeps coming up is how can we innovate? And I say you can't innovate without IT. This is 2015. It cannot be done. How well you can innovate is very much dependent on how well you know how to use IT. So whether you're using websites, whether you're using social media, whether you're using mobile apps, it all comes down to that. So because of these varying issues, right, those are the drivers for the development of COBIT 5 in itself. So let me quickly get to this. COBIT talks about 5 principles. ISO 38500 also talks about 6 principles. All right? Each of the principles have been named differently and are addressing different things, but there is an alignment between the 5 principles that are in COBIT 5 and the 6 principles that ISO 38500 speaks about. But the core of the COBIT document is around these 5 principles: meeting stakeholders' needs, covering the enterprise end-to-end, applying a single integrated framework, enabling a holistic approach, and separating governance from management. These are the 5 principles that drive an organization from a COBIT perspective. And I'll quickly go into that. So number 1 says meeting stakeholder needs. It says that the idea behind information and information technology will be to give comfort to stakeholders, to meet their needs. Actually, COBIT came up with a list of 22 broad needs of businesses. I mean 22 needs of businesses with regards to the needs of businesses. A long list of 22 items that most businesses will find out are their stakeholder needs. Right? Also within stakeholder needs, it talks about the concept of value creation and says that value creation in itself is a governance objective, just like strategy. It is a governance objective. Right? I mean, as I said once again, if you've been doing COBIT for a while, you see what the value creation relies on what? Benefit realization, ensuring that you optimize risk and you optimize resources. So those 3 key things are very important when you think about value. And it says here clearly, enterprises exist to create value for their stakeholders. So when we're talking about stakeholders here, we mean both internal and external stakeholders. So you've got to think about what is important to the stakeholders and how information and related technology can help provide that value to stakeholders. So that's what governance is about. It's also about negotiating. It's about negotiating and deciding among different stakeholders their value interests. And the governance system should consider all stakeholders when making all these decisions around benefit realization, around risk optimization, and resource optimization. So it's important and essential that you understand that who are the stakeholders and what exactly are their requirements, especially from a value perspective. Okay, so COBIT has got. Everybody needs to go register on the ISACA website so that they can get their own personalized versions of the COBIT document, because it's a brilliant set of documentation. It's got 17 enterprise goals that it came up with, saying that these are the top 17 things that are important to an organization. Then it came up with another 17 related IT goals. And then it puts up a matrix that aligns the enterprise goals to the IT goals using primary and secondary relationships. It was brilliant. It was the work of a genius in reality. That I already mentioned to you, it came up with 22 stakeholder needs or business needs. So all these are within the document, and it uses the popular balance scorecard. So it just didn't come up with 17 things as a long list. It came up with 17 different things aligned to the 7 perspectives of the balance scorecard. So it was really brilliant work. So you can look at the financial objectives of a business, the customer objectives, the internal process objectives, and the people objectives of a business on the enterprise and also from an IT perspective. And it shows how these 22 business needs are cascaded into 17 enterprise goals, cascaded into 17 IT-related goals, before we then come up with what is referred to as the enabler goals. So this is real good guidance for IT departments everywhere to be able to use to drive their work with regards to COBIT in itself. All right. So the next principle, I should put principle 2 here, says it covers the entire enterprise. COBIT is not just for a department. It's not just for a unit. It's not just for the head office. COBIT covers the entire organization, end to end. So when COBIT uses the concept of end to end, it means it covers the entire organization from beginning to the end. All right, so it's integrated governance for the entire organization. It covers all functions and processes within the business, whether they're internal or external. So it doesn't matter the department. You cannot say that, oh, a particular department is exempt. No, all the departments in the organization are adequately covered and looked after within the COBIT document. Okay. Then it talks about something called a governance approach. Once again, it brings some roles together. And he says that there's a set of roles called the owners and the stakeholders. You can call that the people, the shareholders of the business, and they delegate their governance responsibilities. They delegate it to the governing body. The governing body in turn is accountable to the stakeholders. That's very important. The governing body sets directions for management. So the management will be the third set of people that we're talking about here, or the third set of roles, management. And management in turn is monitored by the governing body. So the governing body sets direction for management, they also monitor the things that they've set, the objectives that have been set for them. Finally, management instructs and aligns operations and execution, and in turn they report to management. So this is very important. Delegation in terms of understanding who the owners and stakeholders are, the governing body, the management, and in turn, finally, operations and execution. So these are 4 rules, and this talks about governance. So IT governance is a board conversation. There should be a subcommittee at the board level, not just at the management level, at the board level for IT governance. And this is not the IT steering committee. This is a different committee looking at the governance of IT. The third principle here talks about applying a single integrated framework. And all it just says in here is that, COBIT works with every other framework. ISACA, before they developed COBIT, had loads of other documents, about IT, risk IT, all sorts of other documents. COBIT integrates clearly and cleanly with all those documents. Number two, COBIT integrates with everything, whether it's TOGAF for enterprise architecture, ITIL for IT service management, or any of the ISO standards. They are all adequately integrated with COBIT. Okay. Number four, it talks about the holistic approach. So this holistic approach says that there are 7 enablers, and that from a COBIT perspective, these 7 things are the things that enable an organization to achieve IT governance. First and foremost is the principles, the policies, and the frameworks. Number 2 are the processes. Number 3 is the governance, the organizational structures. 4 is the culture, the ethics, and the behavior of the people. 5 is information. 6 is services, infrastructure, and application. And finally, it is people, skills, and their competences. So, holistic approach literally just says that, you've got to look at these 7 things. It calls them enablers. So, if you can see from the list, some of them are soft, some of them are hard. So if you look at the things that are soft, it's principles, processes, organizational structure, culture, ethics, the concept of information, people, skills, and competences. These are a lot of the things that people who do IT usually forget about. They forget about this, they leave it out, they don't take it into consideration, and COBIT says that you've got to take these 7 enablers. That's what it calls them. COBIT has got this brilliant diagram where it connects the 7 of them. And you can see information services, infrastructure, and people below. All of them connecting to the central backbone. In this instance, is like the ESB, like the enterprise service bus here. Is the principles, the policies, and the frameworks that are adopted by the IT or by the entire organization in itself. So it's brilliant when it comes to getting this done. That is what it calls holistic, all right? And finally, COBIT talks about, before that, it talks about enabling process. And this enabling process says that each of those 7 enablers that we've looked at, it provides adequate guidance to ask a couple of questions. I actually have a document that I did where I created the 7 enablers as row headers, and I put stakeholder, goals, lifecycle, and good practices as column headers. So for each of those enablers, you will have stakeholders that are applicable, goals that are applicable, life cycle that is applicable to each of them, and good practices. That means for 7 different enablers, for each one of them, COBIT talks about their stakeholders, their goals, their life cycle, and their good practices. It was great work. It's brilliant work that was done. Further to that, he also talks about performance management, which says that, those 7 enablers, how do we judge them in terms of their performance? What are the metrics that we can use to measure whether they are happening effectively or otherwise? So he will ask you these generic questions saying that our stakeholder needs addressed, our enabler goals achieved, then says that is life cycle managed, and our good practices applied. And of course, if you look at this, it clearly shows that some of them are leading indicators and some of them are lagging indicators, so to speak. So some of them, they're before the fact. They're like critical success factors, like the lead indicators. You put them in place ahead of time, before time. While the lagging indicators are after, that's how you would check whether things are functioning effectively. So it's kind of a post. They're post indicators, while the lead indicators, they are pre-indicators. Okay. So the 5th principle, which is really where I think this is the high point of this entire thing. It talks about separating governance from management. I think this is the high point of everything, where COBIT came up with 37 different processes, and amongst the 37, it carved out 5 of them and called them governance processes. And it then created 5 domains. And one of those domains is a governance domain. I think it was the worst. I think it is great. Because herein lies the real difference. Because a lot of people are confused and say, what does ITIL give that COBIT does not give? What does COBIT have that this does not have? The key thing is that COBIT emphasizes 5 processes that are strictly governance processes, not management processes. So COBIT makes a clear distinction between what is the governance of IT and what is the management of IT. Okay? So governance ensures that stakeholder needs, conditions, and options are evaluated. Management plans, builds, and runs and monitors in alignment with the direction that has been set. This is key and this is fundamental, that you understand the difference between governance and management. Okay? So before I go to what I'll consider to be the most important slide of this entire presentation, I'll stop here first, which is this slide. So there are 4 domains. The first domain is called the EDM, right? Evaluate, direct, and monitor, right? Which is the governance domain. And then the other 4 domains, which you call, the nickname for them, I like to say, is plan, build, run, and monitor, even though that's not the full name, right? So, but that's how that's what I like to call the nicknames of these 4 domains. And it's important that you understand all these 4 domains adequately. APO means align, plan, and organize. Build means build, acquire, and implement. Run means deliver, service, and support. And the final one, which is called monitor, talks about monitor, evaluate, and assess. I've also done some other documents where I've aligned those 4 primarily to ITIL, to try and draw parallels between ITIL and these 4 domains. But ITIL does not speak about governance. Governance primarily is championed and described by COBIT, and herein lies the great thing when it comes to COBIT. So these are the 5 domains. If I move into this diagram, and if you can't remember anything that I've said, and if you forget this entire presentation, do not forget this slide. This slide is the single most important slide on this presentation, and it talks about these 5 domains, and it then brings the 37 different processes, it brings them into these 5 domains. I'm going to need you to look at this. So if you look at the top 5, the top 5 are all governance. Ensuring the governance framework setting and maintenance, benefits delivery, risk optimization, resource optimization, stakeholder transparency, they all belong to COBIT, to the governance domain. Then we move to align, plan, and organize. And there you see the IT management framework is literally referring to ITIL there. Talks about managed strategy. You can see managed enterprise architecture. It's referring to TOGAF there. Managed innovation, managed portfolio, right? Budget and cost, financial management. That's what it's saying. Human resources, relationships, service agreements, supply management, quality, managing risk, and finally, managing security. So there are 13 of them under align, plan, and organize. And some of you who are very familiar with ITIL will already see some similarities in there. All right? So it has borrowed some of them, but it has made it much more extensive. So it also has build, acquire, and implement, which align to the things that you'll find under service design in ITIL. Right? But one of the great things I like about this, it's brought up the conversation of program and project management, which ITIL does not focus on a lot. Then it's brought up the conversation around organizational change, which is brilliant. This is not talking about change management as IT people understand it, like RFCs and things like that. This is talking about organizational change management. Then it also talks about deliver service and support, manage operations, which is very much like operations in ITIL. And finally, it's got monitor, evaluate, and assess, which is very much like CSI. So there's a lot of alignment between COBIT and ITIL, but the brilliant portion in here are the things that ITIL does not cover, and the governance layer that is on this diagram. Once again, if you can't remember this entire presentation and you can't remember anything that we must have said, please remember this particular slide as it is. These are the 37 processes for governance and management. It's called the process reference model, and there are 37 of them. Right? It is extensive. It is a brilliant piece of work that has been done, and anybody who is in IT governance needs to be familiar with these 37 IT processes. All right, good. So there's a full document that COBIT has got. The document is called the Implementation Guidance Document, and it gives a lot of guidance in terms of how do you use COBIT, how do you get value out of COBIT, what triggers COBIT usage, who should be using COBIT during the life cycle of an organization, when should they use COBIT. So it's also a really great document. It's one of the 7 documents that I described up front, and it just gives implementation guidance on how COBIT is meant to be used. Okay, so it does talk about some success factors for implementation. Top management, everybody knows that. IT governance belongs to the board, and the board has to show that they really do know and understand IT governance. All parties are supporting the governance and management of processes to understand the business and IT objectives. Tailoring COBIT. So COBIT does require a lot of expertise. So I work with a lot of organizations sometimes that are struggling from, they know what COBIT is, they have the documentation, they bought it, but they still don't know how to use it. So it does need a lot of tailoring so that an organization can get adequate value from it. Okay, and then there are a lot of factors within the internal and external enterprise environment that must be taken into consideration. The ethics of the organization, their mission, their goals, their operating model, their management style, their risk appetite, all that has got to be adequately taken into consideration. All right, so this is another great piece of work that was done by COBIT. It's called the Implementation Lifecycle. It's also very brilliant. It decides to look at the implementation, not just thinking about it from a project or program perspective, but it looks at it from 4 different perspectives. First and foremost is it would ask you the same questions that you have under, in ITIL, it used to be called, or it's called the CSI approach, where it says that, you know, you just ask you some questions. Where are we now? Where do we want to be? Where do we need to be? How do we get there? All those questions, right? But it then brings the next layer, which talks about program management. And it says that, you know what, from a program perspective, how do we manage implementation from a program perspective? Then it says that there's another layer, which a lot of IT people fail to realize. I've suffered a lot from that, which talks about change enablement. IT projects are change projects. They're organizational change initiatives. And every organization needs to adequately manage those change initiatives to be able to get adequate value from this. So it's important and it's extremely essential that you drive this from a change perspective. Otherwise, you will not get value out of using the methodology like COBIT. Finally, he also talks about the continual improvement life cycle, which is really good, which also just says that, you know what, how do we ensure that whatever good work we've done today is sustained within the organization. So the sustenance of the great work that is done, the measurement and sustenance is very much almost aligns to, you know, the 7-step improvement life cycle in ITIL is what this is about. So this is also another great piece of work done by COBIT that just allows you to look at implementation of COBIT in itself, not just thinking about it from a project or program perspective, but also thinking about it as a change initiative, and finally thinking about how will the initiative be sustained within the organization. All right, great. So COBIT borrows a lot of measurement from ISO. Okay, there is an ISO standard called 15504, which a lot of people are not familiar with. It also borrows from CMMI, because CMMI talks about both maturity and capability models, and I can't really go into the details of that. But if you know COBIT 4, and if you know most organizations, most people speak about their the maturity of their processes. So they talk about a maturity model. A lot of organizations talk about a maturity model, the maturity of their processes. Right? COBIT goes further because CMMI also goes further. If you look at CMMI for development specifically, it not only speaks about maturity of processes, but then also looks at the capability. Capability is at a much lower level. So while maturity is looking at it at a much higher level, Capability goes into details and allows you to look at processes at a low level, right? So the capability talks about level 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Incomplete, performed, managed, established, predictable, and optimized. And the COBIT document goes into a lot of explanation into before you can judge an organization and say your supplier management is established. How did you arrive at that? What did they score? How did you look at it? What was the criteria? All that information is included in some of the COBIT documents. But it's good to understand that you can look at processes not just from a maturity perspective, but also from a capability perspective. All right, there's one of the webinars that I did hold with PECB, and we looked at CMMI specifically. So this is really great. So you can look at this. It says, incomplete, performed, managed, and what is the criteria or the description for you to say that an organization is at any of these levels of capability. So this is really important, and this is great. All right, so enough about COBIT so that I don't spend the entire day speaking about COBIT. Once again, as I said, you really cannot do ISO 38500 except you know COBIT. Because the ISO 38500 document in itself does refer to COBIT in itself. So you can't really work with the standard without understanding the best practice. And as I've said in time past, a lot of the standards are developed from best practice. So it's important that an organization completely adopts a lot of the best practice. So the standard with COBIT, you can't really, if an organization wants to achieve a proper standard, they need to go to ISO 38500. If the business wants a plaque, they want to brand themselves, they want to be able to say to people that, you know what, we've achieved the ISO standard for IT governance, then they need to go to ISO 38500. That is what they need to do. So it's important that people understand where each of these things complement each other. Where does ISO 38500 complement COBIT? When we work for clients, we try and ensure that we marry these four things together. We marry ISO 38500 with 27, with 20, and with 22301. Because it's easier to marry them from a standards perspective. I've seen organizations, sometimes they will write all the standards, then they will write COBIT. But COBIT, it's not from ISO. So if you're doing ISO, it makes sense that you marry the four of them from an ISO perspective. All right? So this is really good. Just like 27,000 relies a lot on the NIST documents in itself. 20,000 relies on ITIL. 38,500 relies on COBIT. So it's good that you can draw a line and marry these together. But I've seen a few organizations who are adopting 38,500. So as part of that adoption process, they've got to really do a lot of COBIT work. And this will really be great and interesting. All right. So 38,500 focuses primarily on governance. It does not speak about the extensive part when you start to look at all the 37 processes and all the stuff that's got to do with management. No, it really just says, directors should govern IT, and they should do it through three main tasks, right? And the number one task is evaluate the current and future use of IT, direct preparation and implementation plan, monitor conformance. So the standard in itself sets out 6 principles for good corporate governance. So and these principles, they express the preferred behavior with regards to decision making. The statement of each principle refers to what should happen, but does not necessarily talk about how. You should refer to COBIT for that. And each of the principles is then tied to the model. So it's good that you see something like this. So we talk about the business pressures, business needs, corporate governance of IT. We talked about EDM earlier in COBIT. Evaluate, direct, and monitor. And plans and policies, proposals come from the businesses, and how this affects ICT projects and operations. So this is really what it is. It's good to achieve a 38,500, but you cannot achieve 38,500 except you've already done COBIT. I cannot overstress that. So it will be good that you know that and that you take that into consideration. Okay, good. So I'll move on. I'll quickly speak about these 5 principles so that we can round up. Principle number 1 just talks about responsibility. So the business and the IT should collaborate in a partnership utilizing appropriate communication to ensure that IT is done appropriately. Then the IT executives themselves, acting on behalf of the board and chaired by a board, it's very effective mechanism for evaluating, directing IT. Directors of small organizations should get very much involved with what is happening from an IT perspective. That's why you see that some small organizations literally head of IT reports to chief operations officer in some organizations. So it talks about responsibility being one of the principles. The other principle here, it talks about strategy. So it says that strategy is extremely complex. IT needs to be involved at the strategy level. IT should not wait till the end. IT should not be fed secondary information. IT needs to work closely with the business to ensure that they understand the strategy and that they can deliver very much in line with the strategy of the business. Once again, COBIT does an extremely good job of explaining a lot of this. ISO 38500, when you buy it from the ISO site, it's just about, I think it's probably less than 20 pages, and it just speaks about these things at a high level. If you really want to get this and to understand how we should do it, you need to refer to the COBIT document. Okay? And yeah, so it talks about balance scorecard, aligning balance scorecard from the business and the IT balance scorecard. So balance scorecard is not just used by the business. It's also used by the IT department. So you can have an IT balance scorecard. Then we have what is referred to as acquisition. And I already mentioned how important service providers and vendors are within the entire space of IT governance. So acquisition of anything that is IT in terms of resources needs to be looked at adequately. It needs to be managed. It needs to be aligned, and you need to ensure that you get the adequate return on investment. You've got to pick the right technology. You've got to pick the right technology provider. These things are very important before value can be delivered. So technology has got to be both fit for value, fit for use, and fit for purpose in itself. So it's got to meet both the utility and the warranty the components as it is. So IT solutions support the business. So acquisition has got to be looked at. You don't just allow procurement departments sometimes that do not understand how IT should be procured to go ahead with it without adequately involving the IT department, okay, or the people who know about it. So there must be a lot of governance around the acquisition of IT. That's what this is saying. And principle 4, once again, is talking about performance. It says the performance has got to be looked at. You've got to come up with your CSFs and your KPIs, and all this to be adequately looked at in terms of performance management. We looked at lagging indicators, leading indicators, key goal indicators, key performance indicators, and performance in itself even needs to be sustained. And you know what they say, if you can't measure it, then it does not exist. So it's important that you understand how performance works, how performance measurement should be done, and how, if you need to build the performance scorecard, how it should be done for IT. And the metrics that you're using for IT governance, are they the appropriate metrics? And do they provide the right information? So apart from performance, there's also the concept of conformance. Conformance just says that IT governance, we should be worried about regulatory issues, we should be worried about statutory issues, we should be worried about whether we're meeting everything that's got to do with law and order, meeting all of them in place. And so it's in a lot of countries, ISO 27000, ISO 20000, even ISO 38500 is not a nice to have, it's a must have, especially in the financial services industry. So the conversation around meeting regulatory requirements is a boardroom discussion that needs to be had and had regularly. And that's what conformance is referring to, right? So are we conforming to everything that has been laid down? Finally, there's a people element to it. Do we have the right people? Are people doing the right things? Are they adequately trained? Do we have the right skills within the IT department to deliver value to the business? Within an ISO, there's not one of the things you look at within an ISO assessment in an organization. Do they have skilled people? Do they have trained people? So these things are very important from a human behavioral perspective, and it's very important and essential that all this is adequately done. So that's primarily it from an ISO 38500 perspective. It really just looks at these 7 principles and refers to COBIT a lot. It is really around what is it that COBIT does have to offer to the organization. Remember what it is that I said, that I gave you the 37 processes within COBIT and how governance has been separated from management, and these 37 processes are very important. Then I showed you this one that talked about how IT governance needs to be implemented in an organization, not just thinking about it from a program perspective, but thinking about it from a program change and continual improvement perspective. And finally, this about the adoption of CMMI capability measurement, capability model, for using it within IT governance, not just using the maturity model. So this is a significant improvement of version 5 over the COBIT version 4 as it is. All right. So, and of course, the 6 principles that are discussed under ISO 38500. So, primarily that is it. There's not a whole lot that is about this beyond this. I believe we're going to put this up on the internet, and people can download it, and they can listen to this again, and they can download some of the materials. All the diagrams and a lot of those things belong directly to ISACA, and I've already mentioned that in my presentation. So for you to effectively do IT governance, or for you to have effective IT governance, you've got to marry these two. You've got to marry COBIT 5 and ISO 38500 effectively for an organization. Okay, thank you very much. I would like to take the questions now.
Thank you very much for this presentation, Mr. Orlando. We have a few questions over here. I will start, and you may answer just a few of them. The first one is, are there any other major differences among COBIT 4.1 and COBIT 5?
Oh, well, there are quite a lot of the differences, apart from the use of maturity and capability. There are a couple of other differences. The way, of course, I mean, they've separated it, they've added the governance layer to it, and the processes here are now 37, which is much more than what you used to have in COBIT 4 in itself. And the way the extra documents have also been done, it's much broader than what it is. The older COBIT did not take risk IT, VAR IT, all those documents into consideration, but COBIT 5 has added all of them. So all in all, I'll say that there's probably a 50% difference between COBIT 4 and COBIT 5. So it's quite huge in terms of the additions that have been added onto it.
Thank you. Okay. The next question is, can I use COBIT 5 as a statement for criteria for specific audit conclusions?
Oh yes, so very much. In fact, a lot of people, when it comes to their audit, the controls and the findings and the conclusions, a lot of what it is that is being used by a lot of organizations is taken directly out of COBIT 5 as at today. So yes, you can use it for your audit conclusions, and you can use it to defend and substantiate your position. Once you follow through with COBIT, there can't be anything higher than that. Okay.
Yes, thank you. The third question is, which businesses are using more COBIT 5?
Every industry, every single industry. Financial services possibly being number one, telecommunications, manufacturing, services industry, everybody. There's no better governance, IT governance methodology in the world than COBIT 5 right now. So everybody who is concerned about IT governance in every single industry is using COBIT 5.
Thank you. The next question is, what is the difference between ISO 38500 2015 and ISO 38500 2008?
What was the other one that you said? I didn't hear that. I didn't get that.
May I repeat the question?
Yes, please.
What is the difference between ISO 38500 2015 with ISO 38500 2008?
Oh yeah, well, I mean the 2015 version is better aligned to COBIT. That's that's it. So in the 2015 version, it refers to COBIT 5. In fact, it really does. It's really about COBIT 5. It just provides some extra guidance that I showed within those principles, but it's better aligned. The older version, the 2008, referred to the older COBIT a bit, but this new one really refers to COBIT 5. That's the major difference.
And the last question is the COBIT 5 framework superior to the other frameworks, such as IETAL and ISO 27000 series?
I don't think it's about superiority. That's not a word that I want to use, but I would say it's much more complete. It looks at IT from a much broader perspective, looks at the business more thoroughly, and then brings in much more than how ITIL looks at it. It's beyond service management, it's beyond enterprise architecture, it's beyond all these things. So I'll say it's much more holistic, much more complete in comparison, but I won't say superior.
Thank you again, Mr. Orlando, for this excellent presentation. I want to thank all the attendees as well for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us. We hope you enjoyed this webinar. We have received all your questions, and because the time is limited, we will answer to your question individually by email. Please check PECB's webinar schedule in our website, www.pecb.com, or our official social media network, since next week we are organizing webinars on interesting topics. Next Monday, on 9th of October, we are hosting a webinar on the topic ISO 21500, a guidance to project managers on ISO 21500 project management standard. Thank you again, and see you in the next webinars. Thank you, Mr. Orlando.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. Much appreciated. All right.